Hello everybody and welcome back. In this episode of Unraveling Autism, we'll be looking at how to choose a school for a child with autism. Oprah Winfrey once said that education is the key to unlocking the world, a passport to freedom. My experience, however, is that the path is different for an autistic child when it comes to education. Education does indeed help to unlock the world in many ways for an autistic child, but I would not call it a passport to freedom. A good education will help to tap into an autistic child's potential, but in most cases it will not be that passport to an independent adult life that neurotypical children usually experience. So for neurotypical children, the traditional experience is that they go to kindergarten, to primary school, to high school, and then into university or college, obtain a career or a trade, and then go into the job market so that they may be self-sufficient and independent. But for autistic children, schooling and education has to be looked at in a different way. And for parents, it has to be looked at in a way that is different to what most parents were raised to believe when it comes to education. Why is schooling a thorny issue when it comes to the education of an autistic child? Traditional schooling is based on certain assumptions and expectations when it comes to the development of a child. In most cases, when a child enters a formal schooling environment, it is expected that he will be able to communicate verbally with his teachers and peers. He will be able to play and socialize with his classmates. He will be able to regulate his behavior so that he is able to listen and learn in a classroom where learning material is presented in accordance with a prescribed curriculum. It is also presumed that he has reached developmental milestones that apply to his age with regard to physical health, cognitive development, emotional and social development, language development, and sensory and motor development. But any parent who has a child with autism will appreciate that these milestones do not correlate to the development of an autistic child in any given year. And autistic children will often lag behind in multiple areas of development. Delays in language and social development have a significant impact on a child's ability to learn in a formal schooling environment. So if a child with autism attends a mainstream school, does he fit into this environment? How does a child with autism fit into a school environment? The most simple and direct answer to this is that in a mainstream school, he usually doesn't fit in. He may experience one or more of the following types of problems in that environment. An inability to fully understand or learn the content of a standard curriculum. Remember that learning is based on language and communication. A teacher will teach mostly by speaking, and the written word, as expressed in a book, is also a form of communication, using symbols. Learning and teaching is also underpinned by social interaction between teachers and learners. And the core of autism relates to an impairment in both communication and the ability to interact socially with others. Children will also fail to integrate socially with their peers in many cases. They will experience bullying because children with autism are different, and being different makes them vulnerable to bullying. Difficulties with regard to regulating their behavior. This is also a problem that they experience, and because they are unable to regulate their behavior in a socially expected manner, they will not be able to participate or to properly participate in and to benefit from a learning situation, such as we find in a classroom. They may also experience anxiety, which may be triggered by a variety of factors in a classroom and also on the playground. So what are the options available to parents when it comes to the education of their children who have autism? The answer varies from place to place and from country to country. It is also affected by the laws in a country that govern the education of a child with special needs. In South Africa, for instance, where I live, the government has an inclusive policy with regard to children with special needs, which means that in theory, these children must be accommodated in a public school in the country. But in reality, children with autism are not actually being accommodated for various reasons, and the vast majority of children with autism do not attend school. So some of the reasons for this relates to time and resource constraints in school, but in many cases, children with autism are simply being turned away, and parents are being advised to find a special school for them where the child can be educated. So the reality is that we have laws that say that your child is entitled to an education, that say public schools are obliged to accommodate your child, but the situation in reality is that children with autism do not attend public schools in most cases. And so parents who can't afford a private school, obviously private school means they need to pay, they would then need to find a public special school. And there are only a few of these public special schools in the country, and they simply cannot accommodate the thousands of children with special needs who have to attend school. So in South Africa, the reality is that if you don't have the financial means to privately educate your child who has autism, then in most cases your child will not get an education. Or your child may be enrolled in a mainstream school where he is kept in classes, but for the most part, no adaptations are made in that classroom to enable him to learn, or very little adaptations are made. And as a result, he cannot access the standard curriculum that is being presented in that classroom due to his disability. And this, in a nutshell, means that he does not get an education. So I don't mean to paint a dire picture of the schooling situation, but these are some of the realities that parents face. So it's best to be aware that in most countries, making a decision with regard to schooling is not an easy one. A good starting point in all countries is to visit the most prominent autism society in your country, and it will usually provide advice and contact information on the schooling options that may be available to you. In South Africa, this organization is called Autism SA, while in the UK it is the National Autistic Society. So here are some of the education options that exist in most countries. Firstly, public schools. These are mainstream schools that are attended by neurotypical children, and if the country has laws and policies that govern the integration of special needs children in mainstream schools, provision will be made for a special class within the school or for the creation of an individualized education plan that is applicable to a particular child with special needs, and which the school will set up to create specific goals for the education of that child. Public schools may have special education teachers or even aides to assist the teacher in the class. And there may be special schools that are also public schools. For example, schools that cater specifically for a disability, such as a school for autistic children or a school for the blind. Then there are private schools. These are schools where parents actually need to pay a monthly fee in order for their child to attend the school, and these schools will provide an adapted curriculum or a special needs curriculum to cater for the needs of an autistic child. So private schools can also be special schools, or they can be mainstream schools, or they can be remedial schools. Then there are special schools. So these schools can be public schools or they can be private schools. In South Africa, most special schools for autistic children are private schools, which means that parents need to pay a monthly fee to the school as well as fees for additional services such as speech therapy. So in this instance, the government is then not in any way subsidizing the education of the child who attends a private school, except for the fact that parents may be able to claim some tax benefits relating to the child attending a private school. In South Africa, there are also special schools across disabilities, but there are also schools that are specific to a disability. Example, a school for learners with autism or a school for the deaf, for example. Then there are remedial schools, and these are schools that usually follow the standard curriculum but then they seek to accommodate the needs of children who have mild to moderate disabilities, such as ADHD or mild to moderate autism. So they then support the child in this environment, but then he needs to access the standard curriculum and needs to write exams in order to pass from year to year, from grade to grade. So these schools will usually have teachers with some experience in education for special needs children, and they will also tend to have small numbers of children in each class to facilitate more effective teaching and learning for children with learning difficulties and learning disabilities. Then there's also homeschooling. So in recent years, the homeschooling option has gained a lot of traction in South Africa. Homeschooling does have many advantages, such as allowing a child to learn in a home environment where they feel comfortable and where parents are also able to provide more input into the learning process. There's also the possibility that it will have a lower financial cost as compared to your child attending a private school. On the other hand, homeschool children will have much less opportunities for social interaction than children who go to school, unless parents actually make a concerted effort to be able to have their children meet other children on a regular basis and ensure that there is sufficient social interaction. Then there are also special education programs. These are designed by trained or qualified therapists, and they can be implemented in the home. So these programs are not affiliated to any school. They are privately done, and they would be done and paid for by the parents using the services of a trained therapist or psychologist. So these kinds of programs are done by private therapists, as I've said, and it could be something like an ABA program, which is specifically designed to help the child to learn behaviors and skills that seek to address some of the core impairments around autism. So as I've said, when it comes to schooling, my experience is that parents of autistic children do not follow the path that is followed by neurotypical parents. For most neurotypical parents, it involves something like looking at the school around the corner or looking at a prestigious school that will match the family's ambitions for their child and where they will then apply. For children with autism, much depends on the mindset and the vision of their parents. The decision about schooling begins with you as the parent of a child with autism. You will make a decision, or you should make a decision that is in your child's best interests. And this will usually involve putting aside your personal expectations and your wishes that you have with regards to your child's education, so that you can seriously consider the actual needs of your child and what would be best for him at a particular point in time. Do you want your child to finish grade school? If you do, the question you need to ask yourself is whether this expectation matches the capabilities and the needs of your child. Choosing a school is not about what you want as a parent, really, about things like social status or society's expectations. It is not about expecting your child to meet goals and standards that do not match his capabilities. If you choose a school that is not a reasonable fit for your child's capabilities, and your child is then accepted into the school, you may find in the long run that your child experiences various problems while he is there, such as, for example, being able to learn or having meltdowns or episodes of anxiety. So the importance of choosing a school that is a correct fit for your child is crucial. So think of the old idiom that square pegs cannot fit into round holes. A square peg will not fit into a round hole regardless of what you do. A square peg must find a place where it will be accommodated. A child with special needs must be given the kind of education that will allow him to grow in development, match his capabilities, but also not underestimate his abilities. It should allow him to use his talents and to explore his creativity. For example, a child who is musically talented should have access to a class or extramural or tutor where he develops his talent. He should be safe, happy, and meaningfully occupied in the school that he is placed in. And education for this child should also involve addressing the needs around his disability. So, for example, a child who is non-verbal should be trained in school to use a specific method of communication, for example, PECS, or the use of an augmentative communication device. And then, of course, there's the overall issue of the financial means of a family. And nothing that I say here is such that it is disrespectful of your financial constraints. For every person, for every family, they will have a particular financial situation, constraints, and they would need to make a decision within those constraints. And nobody is expecting a family to do more than they are financially capable of doing. But then at the same time, families do need to appreciate that as much as a neurotypical child deserves an education, a child who is autistic similarly deserves an education, but obviously tailored to his needs. So you would need to consider your financial situation, consider the resources around you, and then make the best decision for you, your family, and your child in those circumstances. So let's look at this matter practically. A child who is non-verbal or has very limited speech will benefit by learning to read, write, and count in the first phase of school, no doubt about that. But much as these academic milestones are important, it's also crucial that you have a program in place to help your child to communicate or to improve his communication, whether through the use of an augmentative communication device or through an ABA program or a PECS program or any other proven method that teaches your child to communicate and also that provides practical opportunities for him to practice his communication skills. So ideally, this type of program should be done as part of your child's learning program at school. Your child might be able to count, to read, to do cognitive activities such as puzzles, all of which can be learned at school. But does your child, for instance, know how to greet friends and family, or to ask for what he wants, or to say yes or no, or to ask for help when he needs it? Functional communication and social skills are important. They are as important as academic goals and must not be forgotten in the rush to find a school where your child will receive an academic education. So if your child communicates well, on the other hand, if he has good cognitive abilities, but it's just that he struggles to interact socially, then he could possibly attend a mainstream school. That could be an option, provided that the school that you choose and where he is accepted undertakes to support him in practical ways that are spelled out in an individualized education plan, and the school and staff have some experience in teaching and supporting children with autism. If you can afford it, ask an educational psychologist to assess your child and to help you to find a school environment in your area that matches his capabilities. A psychologist can do a report with recommendations, and the report can be given to the school where you apply for your child's admission. Choose an educational psychologist who has experience in assessing and assisting with the placement in school of an autistic child or autistic children. When visiting a school that you have in mind, consider factors such as how many children are in each class on average, the experience and qualifications of the teachers at the school's history and reputation, the curriculum that is being used and how it is being adapted, or how lessons are structured or altered to cater for the needs of individual learners. If it is a special school, what visual strategies or forms of augmentative communication are used to support a nonverbal child, whether learners have individualized education plans, and how these plans are implemented in practice. So as I've said, an IEP is a plan drawn up by the school where it specifies how your child will be taught and supported and how the curriculum will be adapted so that he can access it. Ask to see an individualized education plan if you go to a school, and ask to have it explained to you in practical terms. You can also look at whether additional services are provided on the school premises, such as speech therapy or occupational therapy or animal therapy. What the school does if a child does not cope, you could ask that question, and what measures the school would take to help a child who is not coping. And also whether the school provides the option of a vocational pathway for children who are not able to complete the standard curriculum and to graduate from high school. Other questions that are important are what extramurals are available at the school. So if your child has a talent for or enjoys a particular activity, such as swimming, for example, it would be helpful if it is being offered as an extramural at the school. Then, does the school implement measures to help children who have social difficulties, to help them to interact with their peers? For example, they might have something such as a regular social group that is run and supervised by a teacher. Do not be afraid to ask questions when you go to a school. You need to get yourself to the point where you know enough to be able to make a decision about that school. However, remain polite and do not become confrontational. At the end of the day, it is not about insisting that a particular school accept your child. It is about finding a school that is more than happy to accept your child and that is also completely capable of educating him. Remember that you may have certain plans for your child. For example, you may envisage that you want your child to complete primary school or to graduate from high school or even go to university. But with the education of an autistic child, you will need to take things one day at a time. You may discover that what you envisage for your child in the beginning of this road is not how things turn out eventually. And if this is the case, as long as you make decisions that will help your child to reach his true potential, and as long as he is safe, happy, and purposeful, then you will have fulfilled one of the many obligations that you have as a parent. Separate yourself from the expectations of society and issues such as status, reputation, and just the traditional notion of what school is all about. You have to do this because with developmental delays, it will affect the entire issue of where your child needs to go to school and what your child needs to learn at school. Issues such as status, reputation, your personal expectations, these must be disregarded. As with a special needs child, you will have different goals, and these goals must align to the needs and the capabilities of your child. My daughter, who is autistic, has attended many different schools over the years. She started at a private special school for children with speech and language impairments, then a Montessori school, then she went to a special school for preschoolers. Then we did an ABA program which was taught at home and was not connected to any formal schooling. And this was important to us as we wanted our child to acquire functional communication skills, and really this aspect was being neglected to some extent in all the schools that she had been to. Then she also went to a remedial private school for primary and high school learners, which catered for children with moderate disabilities and learning difficulties, and which followed a mainstream curriculum. Then she did a stage of homeschooling. She completed a homeschooling program for some grades, and she currently, last year, attended a remote learning college, which teaches art and awards both diplomas and certificates. So all these schools catered in various ways for her disability, and they helped her to grow and develop, and I believe to reach her potential. However, some of what she learned at high school and also within the homeschool program was, I feel, not a match for her capabilities. And in many ways, what she also learned in high school was not specifically designed or adapted to cater for her disability. So for instance, she might have been given, or she was given, a textbook, say for instance in history, and this textbook was a textbook that would have been used by neurotypical children, but the content was not in any way adapted or simplified to allow her to understand content. So she then struggled along with a mainstream textbook, and in many cases this created many problems for her. So these are some of the reasons why she did not graduate from high school. And so the take home for me with regard to schools with special needs learners is that they should seek to educate children within the range of their individual capabilities, but this will not succeed also if they don't transmit the content, if they transmit content that is too complex for the child to understand or learn. And of course, you as a parent should not have an expectation that this is what the school should be doing, teaching content that is beyond your child's capabilities. Parents will have to learn to accept and respect the capabilities of their children, while at the same time helping them to learn what they are capable of learning. For most of us, education is a lifelong pursuit, and for children with autism, it is no less so. They will continue to learn throughout their lives, and schools, though they can be a part of this process, will never be able to provide an autistic child with a complete education. And the reason for this is that children are socially educated and academically educated, and educated in many other ways, not just in a school, but also in their homes and also in the wider society. And even a child who is at school needs the continued support and involvement of his parents or caregiver, as the education of an autistic child is the responsibility not just of schools and teachers, but also of parents and caregivers, the wider society, and any therapists who form part of the child support team. For this reason, schooling can be viewed as a step in a learning process rather than as a solution to or an endpoint for all the challenges that our children face on a daily basis. Remember also not to underestimate your child. As much as you need to do what is within your child's capabilities, you also need to recognize your child's true abilities. And with a diagnosis of autism comes a lot of stigma and a lot of low expectation, and it is our duty as parents to look beyond this. Thank you for listening, and I hope that what I have covered here will be helpful to you in your quest to find a suitable school for your child. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you would like more useful and practical information on raising a child with autism. Thank you and goodbye.